Halo 5 Guardians was 343's second effort, and while Halo 4 was divisive, it had its fair share of supporters, and even people who disliked it will say it did some things well. Halo 5's campaign, on the other hand, seems to be disliked by virtually everyone. I'm normally the guy who will play devil's advocate, or do my best to point out the things that a game or movie actually did well when everyone is dogpiling on it. I'm the classic, well, it wasn't that bad guy. That isn't going to be the case here. I have Halo 5 as one of the worst FPS campaigns in my library. From an absolute train wreck excuse of a narrative to having some of the worst gameplay in the franchise, it's hard to find a ton that Guardians does well. And no, it has nothing to do with not playing as Master Chief for enough of the runtime. Journalists misunderstanding issues players had with a game like this is one of the big reasons I wanted to get into game criticism. As it stands, Halo 5 is one of the most disappointing game experiences I've had, and its wasted potential still hits hard to this day for me. With all that being said, we are just ranking the missions, so let's not talk about all the things we dislike about H5, because that will be its own video one day, and instead think about which missions stand out to us as better than the other ones, and which ones left a little to be desired. Also, the opposite rule of the Avatar: The Last Airbender rule is going to apply here. For my episode rankings of the show Avatar: The Last Airbender, I stated that when I said something wasn't good or below average or good not great, I meant that by the standard for the show, which is to say that those things were probably all just fine, if not good elements, they just didn't compare with the high seal of approval the rest of the show was stamped with. Take that opposite mind frame in this video. If I say something is actually pretty okay or good or solid, I mean by Halo 5 standards. Not standards for gaming as a whole, and certainly not the standard for this franchise. This intro is more than long enough, so let's get going with it. Halo 5 features 12 playable missions. No, I'm not counting the 3 guns down missions. Of course, these 12 missions are shorter and really could have and probably should have been combined, but I digress. Let's rank all 12 of Halo 5 Guardians missions. While I stand by the trilogy Halos campaigns being the best for the franchise, I would be lying if I said I missed the long, dark, boring, and extremely repetitive flood-heavy missions. Every Halo game in the trilogy had at least one mission that was a boring slog. ODST, Reach, and 4 didn't have any mission that dipped to the level of the Library or Cortana, but leave it to Halo 5 to buck a positive trend. The Breaking is one of just 3 missions where you play as the Master Chief, and it is Halo 5 at its worst. The Prometheans are Halo's weakest enemy type, so any mission where it's only Prometheans is going to rank towards the bottom. Add to the fact that there is another Warden fight and the obvious padding and repetitiveness, it's no wonder that The Breaking is the worst mission in the worst Halo campaign. With taking all that into account, is The Breaking as bad as the worst Flood mission? I don't know, it's really hard to say, but it's certainly the closest the franchise has gotten to that feeling while playing a mission since those trilogy days. It's a shame the great music in this mission, including a fantastic return of the main Halo theme, are wasted here. It kinda makes me hate The Breaking even more. Unconfirmed is a chore to play in every sense of the word. The gameplay consists of just Prometheans, no Covenant to be found here. This is made even worse by the fact that these Promethean encounters heavily lean on cannon fodder enemies and wide open and often very flat environments. Unconfirmed is pretty much what comes to mind when I think about Halo 5, and that's not a good thing. Let's just move on. Most people will agree that Evacuation is one of the low points in Halo 5, a Promethean-only mission again. Are you starting to notice a trend with these missions at the bottom? It feels much longer than it actually is, another Halo 5 trend. In fact, the mission is pretty much a symbol of everything I hate about Halo 5. On top of that, it is visually uninteresting and kind of ugly. Between these bottom 3 missions, take your pick, or pick your poison more accurately, they are all awful and all deserve to be forgotten. Halo 5's opening level is about as boring and standard as you can get, and I think it is definitely the worst opening in any of the games. It's neither entertaining, creative, or engaging enough as its own mission to work as its own level, or simple to function as a pseudo-tutorial. It's caught in no man's land. The level consists of pretty bog-standard infantry encounters. On the flip side, it throws way too much of the sandbox at you from the start. 3 faction battles in the first 10 minutes of a Halo game? What? Saving certain power weapons for later? Nah. All the tension, build-up, drama, and understanding of making a decent first level does not translate over from Halo 4. And that was Halo 4. Don't even think about comparing it to Bungie's days, and especially not the trilogy. I like snow environments, but even that can't begin to save this train wreck of a first impression. Speaking of snow levels, Halo 5's closing mission, Guardians, is not the high note this game wanted to end on, but I suppose that's fitting considering how the game started and everything that has happened in the middle. Sure, there's a mix of enemies and weapons at your disposal, but after a section of pretty standard and repetitive objectives, you're trapped in a room and have to battle waves of Prometheans. Luckily, this defense section doesn't go on too long, but wave defense in a boring gray room against Prometheans is basically a recipe for a boring Halo level. The words underwhelming doesn't quite cover how uninspired this mission is. Which is a shame, since before the breaking in Guardians, Halo 5 was starting to pick up some semblance of momentum. Glast stands out as one of the vehicle-centric missions in the game. While that does make it stand out at least a little, it doesn't make it good. For the most part, you just drive around in a Warthog and slaughter tons of cannon fodder and weaker infantry. Even when you get the tank, it's pretty much the same deal. I'm really only ranking it this high because it's short and at least a little different when you compare it to the rest of the missions on offer, something Halo 5 really struggles with all around. Genesis is an okay mission. The landscapes you fight on are very open, and you do get a tank for a large portion of the mission. I also find Exuberant Witness absolutely adorable, but mostly Prometheans and yet another Warden fight hold Genesis back. Reunion is just the second mission with Chief and Blue Team, and it is a perfectly fine mission. The best section is when you get the choice between going through an area on foot or flying around with a Phaeton. Having a choice like that is nice, but it's just one section and doesn't exactly move the needle too much, as it isn't exactly some big addition or something we haven't seen before. Halo 3 especially consistently gave the player multiple options for combat. Choice should be expected, not really commended. The low point is probably your second fight with the Warden Eternal, but a good 90% of the mission is just traditional gunfights, nothing very special here. Basically the bare minimum from what I expect a level to be. Is Battle of Tsunai on a good mission? No, not really. Do I feel more awake and invested when I play it? Yes I do. Having a massive battle unfold around you is so nice when compared to a lot of the rest of the missions in the game. However, when you look at what's going on underneath the window dressing, it's far less interesting. It's mostly just standard Covenant fights with Promethean encounters at the end. The elites you get to fight alongside as allies is a nice touch, but there still could have been more companions to drive home the large-scale battle feel. Also, the aesthetics in the mission are really the only time a Covenant-based art style was used, and I really love some of the detail into the level and environments. Let's move on into the top 3. Earning the bronze medal for Halo 5 is going to be Blue Team. Blue Team is the best Master Chief mission in the game, but that's not really saying much. I like the fact that the mission is Covenant only, and the level isn't as bad in terms of having enough gameplay options and not being too flat of an environment. A Banshee section at the end of the mission helps as a change of pace, but it still fails to leave a lasting impression. Overall acceptable, but unspectacular. But in Halo 5's case, that is enough to rank you in the top 3 apparently. Swords of St. Helios is the first part of your fight on St. Helios. The highlight of Swords of St. Helios is the Mantis section at the end, which is basically the second half of the mission since the mission's so short. The first half of the level is a Covenant fight. Nothing particularly special, but it beats Prometheans any day of the week. I have Swords of St. Helios up this high primarily because, unlike most of Halo 5, it has just enough of its own blood to feel unique instead of just running all together like most of the rest of the game. Enemy Lines is my pick for the best Halo 5 mission. I think what makes this mission the best is the way it actually feels built around Halo 5's Spartan abilities. Let's ignore the fact that I hate Spartan abilities, they clearly don't belong in Halo, just for a second, and let's take a look at enemy lines within the confines of its own experience. It's well documented that Halo 5's levels were being constructed well before Spartan abilities were set in stone. This is why for a large portion of the campaign the powers feel useless, and more often than not players will forget they even have some of these abilities. The play spaces found in enemy lines do a much better job of incorporating and encouraging the players to use these Spartan abilities. That at least holds true for the first half. The second half with the Kraken is pretty much just a repeat of the Scarab from Halo 2. But overall, through a couple playthroughs of Halo 5, my best memories tend to be on enemy lines, and I do feel like it is the best incorporated with Halo 5 Sandbox. And there it is, Halo 5 is finally done. My next Halo ranking series is going to be ranking Halo's multiplayer maps, so hopefully you guys will be around to check that one out. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you for the next one.